For centuries, mankind has been fascinated with realms outside of our conscious awareness. Through a series of interviews with practitioners, guest speakers, and experts, Liberate the Podcast covers all that and more. From health and holistic healing to the supernatural, we aim to educate, motivate, inspire, and liberate your consciousness. Hi, welcome to another episode of Liberate the Podcast. Today we have a special guest that's going to be joining us as a pretty regular collaborative partnership at Liberate Hollywood for many different classes and workshops. She's doing her national best book tour right now. So she's been in and around, and she will be doing workshops. She's a shaman. She's going to share a lot of knowledge and insight on a whole bunch of shamanistic traditions and many different things today. I mean, well, you know how these podcasts go. We never know where they're going to go, but I'm sure they're going to go somewhere amazing. So thank you, Erika, for joining us today. Can we share a little bit about you?
Hi, Cristina. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So, so my background, I have 20 years of experience and training as a curandera. And curandera, it's you can say it's a shaman. It's a Latin American shamanic healer. And it's a very dynamic, eclectic practice, I should say. We drawn from a lot of different traditions, Spanish traditions and Christian beliefs, and we drawn some Caribbean, some Africans, just various different traditions. But our principal roots are from the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
Okay.
A lot of ceremonies, the traditions and practices come from that. So that's a little. Yeah, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to backtrack a little because even though it's becoming more of a common term and a word that's used that people are knowing a little bit more about, what do you use to describe a shaman, and what is that? What is a better descriptor for maybe people that don't know as much about it? And of course, you know, your particular, because then there's a whole range of different types of shamans, like, you know, you're drawing from all these different cultures. So what does that mean for you, and what does that term mean in general?
Well, for me personally, it means it's something completely Western constructed.
There we go.
It's actually Mircea Eliade, who's a ritual theoretician. He's the one who popularized it.
Okay.
And then it became, you know, it was something that we people, us Westerners, have said, okay, you're a shaman, you're a shaman, you're a shaman, this is a shaman. And, you know, but at the same time, though, there's us who we have appropriated it. You know,
Yeah.
we're like, okay, yes, we'll take that. So in my book, as I say, because for us, when I describe for a lot of the shamans, in my book, in their practices that they had, their Limpia practices, their cleansing practices, I basically say, okay, look, when I know the name of that specialty that they practice in, I indicate the name of whatever kind of shaman they were.
Okay.
But when I don't know the specific trade, I call them a shaman, and I define shaman specifically, because I also recognize the limitations. I say, I know that it has been used, you know, there's been a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said, you know, that term is not appropriate to describe indigenous peoples, because it essentially essentializes them, it reduces them, you know, it's having them as it reduces them to this picture of this noble savage.
Yeah.
That they have this understanding that they can, you know, so they basically say it's not appropriate. But I say, okay, look, you know, the way I see it, the way I'm going to take that term and appropriate it, because it's so common now that a lot of the materials that we have to, you know, to look at, to call them a priest, they're not really a priest, because that has its own own little things, right, going on. So I'd say the way I would define shaman is someone who engages in rituals that are very eclectic, that can cleanse the mind, the body, the spirit, and also revitalize us as well. And also that we work and that we can see generally beyond what meets the eye.
Yes.
in different dimensions and realities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially how I define it.
Okay.
Um, you know, and that's basically because it's a very much a constructed term.
Yes,
And
and
yeah,
because it's a constructed term and because there's so much variation on it. You have people that, go down and spend a few weeks working with some plant medicine. They come back into the United States, and because they smuggled some back in or whatnot, and they administer a ritual, they're like, oh, I'm a shaman. And it's like, okay, and then you have, the true natives that from different cultures and different traditions that, they, even though they have 50 years of experience, they still don't call themselves a shaman, and
yeah,
so you have this like huge variance. And so I thought that it was really important to take a moment to, kind of get us on a neutral ground for understanding for our viewers of like, this is what you're talking about when we state these types of, you know, traditions and rituals
yeah.
and cleansing practices, and so people can have a better understanding of the authenticity of you and the integrity that lies behind it.
Yes, honestly, it took me 18 years to identify myself as a curandera because I think it was a big part of it was like I always felt like I was a mentee. Because as a
Yeah.
curandera, there's no certificate that you get as a curandera that like officially a curandera.
Yeah, you don't take a weekend course and say you are certified. Go out there.
It was always like something that I was always in training. And
Yeah,
I still identify myself because even though I am teaching things, my students sometimes I know they teach me as well, right? So I'm
yeah,
always in
of
process
course.
and training. But it wasn't until I was in 18 years afterwards until I had actually one of my mentors look at me like, honey, I think it's time to come out of the closet now.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, that I was like, oh my goodness. And because there's also a lot is tied into, especially coming from the background that because it's so indigenously rooted
Mm-hmm.
and there's still a lot of discrimination, a lot of belittling of the indigenous peoples. Like, even in Mexico, for example, like we have Diego Rivera where they have all these, beautiful murals with indigenous people. They have them painted up, but you see in the communities, they are not living well. They
Yeah.
are not living well. And it's, and even growing up, I remember crossing the border because I lived in Juarez. I lived in Juarez for about 8 years, and I remember crossing the borders, and I always saw what there were indigenous people, that the Taramaran people,
Mm-hmm.
and and I remember my family. I remember one of my aunt's family friends, and they were like, "Oh, don't give them money, don't encourage that, because I offered them a job and they didn't even want to work."
Wow.
It was seeing, and you see these things growing up as a child that like there's still a lot of idiosyncrasies that it's still, and it's very interesting because even people who I work with, who I know they've worked with shaman, I know they've worked with other curanderas and curanderas, they don't identify themselves as a curandera or a
Mm-hmm.
curandero.
Yes.
Even it's just intertwined with all these different paradoxes and idiosyncrasies that eventually you have to heal all those things.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, yes, this is who I am. This is who I've been practicing. This is who, and I'm gonna own it. It's part of my culture.
Yeah.
And I say I'm cool with it. I just say, just call me.
Call me and I'll be there. Lean on me. Ah. So what would you say, like, so 18 years before you identified and kind of came out of the closet in that sense, and but your background, you have you have a master's in religious studies, right? and you're also a coach and a healer. And so, like, what got you down the journey? How did you even, like, what was it that called you into, this line of work, and what was your story?
Oh goodness. It's been a process. It's been something that's been like happening, like unraveling, like the universe. I feel like, it's really interesting, the fate. There's a part of me that says, like, is there fate, or am I creating it, the free will? So it's that
Oh my
that
God, yeah,
wonderful
that do
dance,
do 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 do.
that wonderful dance, right? Because I really feel that, because I come from a long line of curanderas. My great great grandmother was a curandera,
Oh
and
wow.
she was very well known. She was very, like, she actually during the Mexican Revolution, she owned a saloon. She was one of the few women she was a business person. Her had her own saloon, and she was a curandera. And you did
Wow.
not mess with that woman.
Wow.
And my great grandmother, who I actually was very fortunate to be around till I was about, yeah, till I moved out here. She also was a curandera. She used to heal with cooking. She did healing work with cooking, and divination work with cooking too. And I
Beautiful.
grew up seeing that. And then it was very interesting. My grandmother, she actually became a nurse. So she started becoming more Western. And then my
Okay.
mom was the first one to go to college. So it was like seeing that shift in my family,
Mm-hmm.
like that more, like it was like that culture was still there. Those stories were still there, but it was like something of yesterday. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, we still had the plants, we still knew about the plants, we still used the yerba buena, we still use the mint,
Yeah.
the manzanilla, the chamomile, like different. We had knowledge of it, we still used them, but it wasn't as it was as strong when my great great grandmother, when
Yeah.
as those traditions. They were more like stories, right? And it was like, oh, but now that was who we were back then.
Got you.
But it still calls me, and I remember growing up with that, because my father passed away when I was very young. So I was very much with my great grandmother. So I was very much around that.
Mm-hmm.
I was very much involved in that, and I saw that growing up. I
Yeah.
saw those traditions. So I was very much exposed to that. And it was very much dear to my heart. I was doing limpias when I was already 5. Like, I already was pulling out herbs and working with things, and
Of course
you know,
you were. It's in your
and
blood.
and it wasn't until I got to college, because I came here to LA, and I got cut away from my culture, and then I came here and I learned that it was bad to speak Spanish.
Hmm.
You weren't supposed to speak. Now it's more accepted.
Yeah.
Now they have schools where it's like, oh,
It's bilingual, and yeah, they
yeah,
teach both.
yeah. And when I came, it was very much still like, no. Like, I remember getting hit with a ruler on my back one time, because I couldn't understand the lesson because they were speaking in English, and I looked up like, what is going on? Like, I
Aw.
don't understand what's going on, and I remember seeing, it's like, okay, my culture is bad. There's something wrong with me.
Hmm.
And I kind of had a little bit I had a lot of that. And then finally in college, I got exposed to some really progressive Chicano study professors, and they let me study alongside economic globalization, curanderismo. So I was talking about, studying economic globalization, how it's affecting people on a small scale. How it's affecting people, like healing methods, and it gave me an opportunity to study about those traditions again.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, my awakening happening with social justice.
Interesting.
It was very, like, because it was very interesting, like seeing a lot of like, I came at a time where it was a hunger strike at UCLA, where we were trying to. I wasn't involved in it because I went there after the hunger strike happened, but we didn't get the Chicano study departments until after. So it
Okay.
was very much. They had a center at the time for the Chicano Studies Center, Chicanic Study Center, but it wasn't there. It wasn't present there.
Okay.
So when I got there, the feeling of social justice, and it's like, hey, there's so many of us. We want to study our culture.
Yeah, of course.
We want to study our history, and we had to have a strike so we can have that happen. At UCLA, when there's so many of us here.
Yeah.
Now it's now, because of all the work that was done, now it's like, yeah, they have degrees where they're recognizing that, and now that's more accepted. But when I was in school, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So I very much was in that, and then it was very much a turn where I was seeing a lot of the things that I was like, my eyes were very much open, and I was seeing a lot of the social injustices that were going on,
Mm-hmm.
just all the different things, and then I decided, okay, I'm gonna go to law school and become an attorney, and I'm gonna save the world. And I was very much, well, not save. I was very
You are saving the world.
yeah,
And you're doing it from a better stance than attorneys. No attorneys that are listening, but instead of
yeah,
just going back and forth fighting for,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
actually healing and transforming the individual.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, oh yeah. And I was very much involved in like thinking the civil rights, and I got very much swept up in that
Mm-hmm.
sentiment, right? Um, and So my second year in law school, I got pulled in. The universe had something completely planned differently for me, and I met my first two set of mentors, and I met this other gentleman who had this property, who he just had it sitting there, and I just was like, hey, I'm in law school, and I know some people that would want to rent your property. How about I help you, to rent that out, and that commission paid for my way until I could afford to go there to get my mentorship. And I did that
Wow.
for 7 years. I continued mentoring. That was my first mentorship period. And then I was working this dual life where I was a mentee, and I was taking all kinds of other classes here in the States, and I was still mentoring there. And then I had a catastrophic injury in 2005
Hmm.
where I fell off a cliff. I woke up, I was airlifted, I had a skull fracture, a brain hemorrhage, left AC dislocated, two vertebrae in my back fractured. I completely shattered my coccyx. Left leg, I fractured it in three places. Right leg, knee down, all of my bones shattered. Came out of my heel. I
Wait,
got
wait,
sick.
wait. How did you fall off of this cliff?
I didn't, I did this really intense journey. I did some journey work,
Okay.
and I had a time slip.
Ah,
I didn't ground myself after
okay.
that. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna miss my flight. I'm gonna miss my, because I was in Vegas. I was at Red
Got
Rock,
you.
and I didn't ground myself, and I just like was like the bunny and Alice and the little bunny in Alice in Wonderland, and running around like I'm gonna miss my flight, and I did. I fell off a cliff. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the hospital, you have every injury known to man. I mean, and I mean, I'm laughing now because I look at you and it looks like you're doing okay. There
Yeah.
might be some
Yeah.
residual
Yeah.
injuries that you're still coping with. Um, but
No.
okay, so now you're in the hospital. You realize that, of course you're missing your flight and you have a lot of healing to do. So, oh, keep on going. I know you're sharing what that was for you. It's a turning point.
So, and they also told me that they were gonna 6 weeks later I got severe osteomyelitis. They told me they were gonna amputate my foot. All this craziness.
Wow.
Sorry, your coccyx is shattered. We can't do anything about that. You're gonna be in pain the rest of your life. Yeah, and you got severe osteomyelitis. You lost half the bones in your right ankle.
Wow.
Um, you're not gonna be able to walk again normally. And because it was still a question mark. They
Yeah.
weren't sure I was gonna be able to walk. It's gonna be with some kind of assistance.
Wow.
And one of the decisions I made was, and this is something that's very common in the Curanderismo tradition, the word is called the don, and it's a
Okay.
gift of healing.
Okay.
And I truly, in my heart, believe that we all have that gift.
Yeah.
It's just latent in us.
Mm-hmm.
I tapped into my gift, and I embraced my gift because it was just something that I just said, okay, either I'm gonna do this and apply everything that I learned, or I'm gonna be in pain the rest of my life, and I'm not gonna be able to walk. So I was basically forced to slow down. And
Mm-hmm.
long story short, after not walking for almost a year, I was in a wheelchair for almost a year, by the way. I was in
Wow.
a wheelchair. After not walking for almost a year, I walked with a completely normal gait in less than 2 weeks. But in that year, I applied everything that I learned for my first 7 years of mentorship. And I put everything into practice. I worked with all the herbs. One of my mentors, she was a sobadera, which is somebody that works with their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's similar. You can kind of think of it like acupressure, but like like as a shaman.
Okay.
Yeah. So I knew how to work with acupressure points in my body, so my body my muscles wouldn't go into atrophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew how to go into a journey, to take myself into a journey, how to work with different plants, how to do limpias, how to do cleanses, and I did all those things on myself. And by the grace of all that is wonderful, I walked with a completely normal gait in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then,
well, it was almost like it was your schooling or training ground to allow you to excel in almost your testing period of like, okay, you learned all of this. You've been being infused since you were 5, playing with different herbs. Your doctors are saying you're probably not going to walk and you're going to be in pain for the rest of your life. Are you going to conquer what they say and you're going to use what you've learned and try it out so that you can master and teach others? Or are you going to suffer? And, and you passed and learned and evolved, and now you can take all of that. But I mean, sometimes we can't know until, that's what I'm constantly working on with people, is that you don't know. Sometimes your biggest tragedies are truly, truly your biggest gifts, because they will set us on a different course. They will teach us so much. They will empower us or allow us to master the things that we must,
Definitely.
And,
Definitely.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, then after, but the thing is, I was still really stubborn.
Okay.
I was so stubborn. I was stubborn. I was, I still was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. Cause I didn't realize it, but looking back, I still had a mindset where it's like, well, no, I can't be a curandera. That's something I just like to do,
I still need to finish law school. No.
Well, yeah, and I was already practicing law at the time,
Okay.
And but it was really interesting because during that time, when there are times that I did cry, the only time I cried was because thinking that I had to go back to work as an attorney, not because I was like injured.
That's when you know. Those are like the red flashing signs that are so obvious. They're like, well, every part of you hates this and dislikes it, but yet you're still forcing yourself. And when you do this, it's pure joy and love and bliss, and you feel energized. Let's keep on doing the thing that we dislike,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was still, pretty stubborn because I was very much for many different reasons, right? So at that time, I went back to, I actually went after my last surgery, I went to another part of the Yucatan, a little further south, and I met my second set of mentors.
Okay.
And during that time, it was a beautiful experience, and I was also getting the calling to understand the ancient traditions.
Okay.
Because I knew that a lot of the tradition, and I knew this in my heart because I remembered a lot of the things. And, I was very much intuitive when I would go and I would leave a candle for an offering, or I would leave water, or I would leave certain things, or I would design certain things. It was very intuitive.
Okay.
My mentors taught me a lot about the methodologies, but I didn't know a lot of the things I didn't know what questions to ask a lot of the times that would elicit the answers, that would explain to me the beliefs and traditions of the indigenous peoples, of my history, So I decided, it's like, well, I'm just kind of, I don't know what I don't want to keep practicing law, so I'm just going to give grad school a try. I'm going to go back to school and see what happens, So I went back, and that part was a very interesting experience because I had a soul retrieval experience during that time. Many. because I was going back and I was reading a lot of the ethnohistorical records, and I was like, oh my God, that's why I do this. Oh my God. It was just all these aha moments. And
Yeah.
it was like I was getting pieces back of myself,
Mm-hmm.
not just from this lifetime, but from many.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, but at the same time, I realized it's like I didn't want to study the curanderas or the shamans. I am that.
Mm.
It
That's
was like,
beautiful.
and because also during this time I was practicing too, because I started actually practicing, but I didn't identify myself as a curandera. I
Mm-hmm.
identified myself as an alchemist, a spiritual alchemist, as a healer. I wasn't really sure, and there were times when I didn't feel comfortable with like, how do I identify myself? How do
Yeah.
I all these labels. I was like, I don't like these labels. Uh, and you know, but it wasn't until I had that really like that connection after 18 years that I was like,
Mm.
this is who I am. I just really just like, this is home.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I just had this really beautiful experience where just I called myself a curandera, and that felt like home to me.
Yeah. And that goes with, one of the things that you'll be teaching in the workshop is, the power of the spoken word and intention, and so when you call that into being and existence, that even though you were prior, when you spoke it, you really embodied it. It glue, right? You glowed more with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a little bit. It's been a process. It's been a very jagged, bumpy, idiosyncratic, paradoxical road.
As
Not
it
like
all is, but
anyway.
that's the beauty of it. And I think when people hear your story and the different, it's very seldom and anywhere do people take a straight line to something. Like we live in this beautiful journey called life, and when we think that we're going one way, sometimes we get flown the other direction, only to do the zigzag path that when we look up and we say, oh, it's the perfect path.
Yeah.
um and so
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I I love hearing the challenge and acceptance and the different courses that you went on, and the trials and tribulations and even the injuries, because that all makes this, you know I mean, I there's a lot of people that I meet over the years, and to find people that are truly in their authenticity and just embodying and have shed away. What that tells me is you've shed away so many layers of the ego that it's not there. And you're allowing yourself, this is who I am. And that little residual of how to identify myself was probably the breaking point of like throwing that away, the rest of that ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I feel that it's also good to, when I do share too, because a lot of people when they do come, they and I'm sure you get this too, is that it's like, how do they make the transition? People that want to do this work too.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how, it's like, when I share that, it's how the process for me,
Yeah.
because sometimes that's what it is. It's a process. And
Mm-hmm.
many times that's exactly what it is. It's a process. And sometimes that's what it is financially too.
Of course. Yeah.
Because I had the reality way back when that I had 150,000 in student loans from law
Mm-hmm.
school, just law school.
Yeah.
Almost that. Now they're gone, by the way. Yay!
Yay!
Which is really ironic. I paid that off like a while back as a curandera. I was like working with this, but doing a bunch of other things. But it was like okay, I am no longer this. Now I'm this. It
Yeah.
doesn't in the real world. It's just you have mortgage. Some people have children. It's one of those things. It's like you have to be diligent, you have to be disciplined, and you have to be like focused. And that's what it was. It was like a process. It's like, okay, when I decided when I got out of school, I was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
I know I didn't want to be a professor. It's like, okay, when I still have a mortgage, I still have my loans, I have all these things. It's like, all right, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna do the attorney thing, but this time I'm gonna do social justice issues. And I did that, and then I said, you know what? I didn't want to just give people money, so it was like, okay, let me start just doing contract work. I started doing executive coaching. It was, and then working as a curandera, it was like, but it was a process.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful process where I was honoring that.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And some people can be like, it's a shift, not always, and sometimes it's that's what it is.
Yeah, it's, the cake doesn't bake just with mixing the ingredient. Yeah, I mean, there's a process to it, right? And there's a joy about that process, right?
Yes.
That I think that a lot of people, do you practice law still?
No, I have people that come to me all the time though, and they are going through divorces, or they're going through things,
so you still help
or
out
they're
with
doing
it,
business, and I know things,
yeah.
so those things come into play.
Yes.
My training as an executive coach, as a mediator, comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got an offer to. It's really interesting. It's a course at a Cal State that I've been offered to teach on conflict resolution, shamanism, and conflict resolution.
That's yeah. I love that that's even being offered at Cal State LA.
Right. It's actually going to be. I'm not sure it's how it's going to look, but they're thinking about it, and they're approaching me about it, and I'm just like, yeah, that sounds great. I always say that all those things, I never look back and say, oh, I never needed that. Why did I even do that?
Yeah.
Because I had one client who is going through something, that's going through divorce, and I could say, honey, this is how long it's going to take realistically.
Yeah.
So, this is what it's going to be. I can kind of like tell them a little bit about it without being the attorney, or anything like that. And those things always come into play.
Exactly.
Always come into play, and it's a way of doing it that holds space as a healer, as a shaman, as seeing, as clearing that energy for them. And because we live in the real world, and in the real world, we need a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful that you're grounded within that practicality too, then that you can understand what on the physical plane it takes to operate. Because I think a lot of people get caught up so much in the esoteric world and that other dimensions that it's like, okay, well, there's still, like, we're living in this linear form still, so we can't just be like, okay, and manifest, and okay, I'm just gonna quit my job and I'm gonna get $1 million tomorrow. It's like, oh well, all of that is possible, but let's also work on, like, creating achievable, realistic expectations to set you up. Because the journey is also very important. Like, of course, you could have stopped just like that and went into, and let go of law right away. But there was also maybe learning in the people that you did help, in the cases and the clients that you did take on. But also there was a part of you that is still a part of you. So it's almost like weaning that off and expanding, it was part of your journey too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was really interesting. It was towards the very end that I felt like I made peace with the career as an attorney.
Yeah.
I feel like, like it was like one of those things. Like I actually was okay with it. Like at the end, I was like, okay, it was. And then because I was also meeting a lot of other attorneys who were also very much on a new front.
Mm-hmm.
Also wanting to do more mediation kind of things, to do more conflict resolution, more progressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have all kinds of different names for them, but I was meeting a lot of them, and it was, I wouldn't go back to that. I'm very happy where I'm at right now.
Yeah. But you need, going from, dreading going back to doing law to having a peace and actually, it's almost like you had that closure. It's like a relationship, right? Like when you're breaking up, like, okay, if it's just cut off and you don't get that closure and it didn't like kind of have that healing meant to it, people have more jagged or views in one way or another. But if you can have that time where you like, okay, well, I've kind of let go when I feel at peace and I'm comfortable and they're comfortable that we're no longer together, then it doesn't have a charge on you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really nice because it's, they also influence me too, because I had one experience recently where I was like, I had a partner who was very upset at a divorce. She was ready to get a divorce, and it was very charged, and I was helping her clear that energy as a shaman. But I was using the practicality of law. I was like, okay, well, you know what though, honey, you're entitled to spousal support. It's not about like, F him.
Yeah.
It's something that's going to help you transition. You're entitled to, you're a mother. So it's looking at it from a point of view of hoping to heal.
Yeah.
So there's not that charge of that anger. It's not coming from a space of like, oh, I'm going to stick it to them. And it's like, it wasn't, so I was like, Tom's like, because she was like, oh, well, we're going to win. It's like, no, honey, nobody wins when it's a divorce. Nobody wins. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like change, like shifting that dynamic, and it's a beautiful experience of bringing all those things. And I've healed with them, they've healed with me, and they're still part of my little curandera handbag.
Wow. So what kind of things when people come to do private sessions with you? You're talking a lot about clearing, and I know that, on the 28th, you'll be doing your book signing and lecture and talking about clearing. And then on the 30th, going through a whole bunch of different, whole workshop of stuff. But like, I would love people to know, like, what can they expect from you? So there's a lot of, as we started out, so many different traditions and ways. But like, how do you work with clients, and what do you work on most of the time?
So, so a typical session is basically, we start out with what's called a plática. So it's a heart straightening talk.
Okay.
Right. And that comes from the tradition. It's understanding that, and this is something that goes way back to the ancient. They had, and I talk about this too in my book, Cleansing Rites of Curanderismo, where I talk about it, where they had state ceremonies where people would go out and release it, because it was believed that with talks you released energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, you release energy. So it's one of those things that it also helps me to navigate where we're going to journey to and what needs to be done.
Okay.
And then sometimes that's what the plática, that's what it is. It's like that story just needs to be released. And that they basically, if all they want to do, that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. Depending on, I try to integrate also some energy clearing as well. Mm-hmm. So then I have them, depending on what they need, I'll do specific other kinds of limpias. And it also depends too if I'm seeing them in person or remotely too, right?
Okay.
So for example, if they're in person, I might go get an herb and cleanse them with an herb. I might get them with an egg. Because sometimes I do egg limpias when I feel that something's attached to them.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, like, the egg becomes, like, dark in the inside, right?
Yeah. I feel like there's just something that, I just get that sense that there's just, whether it's just an energy, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily like an entity, maybe it's just energy that's just not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's just not theirs. That and that they're, because sometimes people with fibromyalgia, that happens too. People that are like constantly exhausted, that something's sucking at their energy.
Yeah.
So I do an egg limpia for it, and that gets it out, and then afterwards we'll go on a journey where there'll be other energetic clearings. So the limpias can happen in many different ways. I may work with herbs. With herbs, I will bring in herbs and flowers as well. Flowers if they're asking for abundance, if they've had money issues.
Interesting.
Or if they want abundance. Flowers are very much, or like if they want joy too.
Oh.
If there's some kind of like joy, if there's money issues, I bring in flowers.
Are there a certain particular type of flowers?
Roses are really good. Roses are really good for love.
Beautiful.
Especially when it's something that they want to attract in love.
Yes.
Like when it comes to money, there's honeysuckles. I'll prepare a tea for them. If I have honeysuckles growing. So depending on that, and then if it's like some other like energetic clearing, like if it's just energy that they just like feel like they just have like energy, like heavy energy on them, then I'll use rosemary. rosemary, I'll use rue. It just depends. I'll cleanse them with that, and I will then go and clear them with either Florida water. I'll run a feather fan through them and over their body, and then we'll do some clearing energetically. Where I will do a journey and see what is going on. I will journey and see what's going on, where they're at, because they also may need some soul retrieval too.
Yeah.
Where they gave away their power. That happens a lot, or something's missing, something's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so it depends on what they need, and then depending on if they're asking a question, because the tools are also divinatory in practice as well. Like for example, like if I do a cleansing with a puro, which is a cigar.
Okay.
If I cleanse someone with a cigar, the way that the puro is burning, it will tell me, if it's like burning underneath, it's like something that's going on that they didn't know about. If it's burning to the right or to the left, it's depending on how it's burning. If there's holes, burning inside, I put some cinnamon on it. It will tell me if they've integrated, because what I feel is that no one can ever do anything to us unless we allow it.
Yes, of course. And
unless we allow it. And if there's a hole burning in there, that tells me that they've allowed someone to do something to them.
Yeah.
That they gave their power away, and somehow that person energetically or something got in. So then I put some cinnamon on to clear it. Then I'll continue, blowing the puro, the cigar over their body, and until the puro is burning straight, like just completely even. Then that usually will tell me that okay, that it's good. The energy has been cleared. But it has to burn evenly, because you want that cigar just to burn nice and evenly.
You sometimes have to go through a couple cigars on people.
Yeah. Or sometimes like I'll do what's called a white fire limpia.
Okay.
And what it is, it's a pot, and it's a pot that is used and one thing too in all of these things, that goes back to the indigenous tradition.
Yeah.
That all the tools you use, whether you want to call it shamanic or curanderismo tradition, all the tools that are used are only used for the rite, for that ceremony. You never use that glass for drinking from, or that plate to eat on, or like the pot to cook from.
Well, yeah, especially if it's pulling in all of that negative energy, and then let me eat that. Nope.
Exactly. And it's also understood that those tools, they also have a soul essence energy. That they also have a sacred energy of their own. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. So, it stopped for a second. So they have their own sacred essence energy. So, what I'll do with the white fire limpia is I will get a couple handfuls of Epsom salt. I'll get a splash of rubbing alcohol, and I'll give them some herbs or flowers to work on, depending on whatever issue is going on.
Yeah.
Right. And then I will put a match in it so it'll start burning, and then I'll have them say a prayer. I'll say whatever it is that they have, whatever it is that their intention was that they're releasing. I have them write it down. They put that paper into the fire, and they start making offerings of flowers or resin into the fire, and that helps transmute the energy. And then after, when that is done, I put water in the pot. Okay. And let it sit for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then after, I dump it out. And depending on how much residue there is on there, and I can read afterwards what it looks like, it will tell me how much of it was cleared. And it's usually always, it is spot on.
Wow.
Like spot on, it's just because all the tools that are always used are always divinatory in nature. They can tell you this still needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it's not one of those things where, and I always want to express this too in the cleansing and the limpias, it's never about, like if you use a candle and for example, it turns black,
Mm-hmm.
After you said a prayer and like after it's all done and the glass itself turns black, it's not that it's blocked.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it's not going to happen. It's that the person needs to do more work.
Yeah. Which, like there's a process to everything, right? If you're telling your story, you were in a wheelchair for a year. Yes, when you were ready, it only took 2 weeks from that point to be able to walk normal, but you had a year of a process. If you would have started to get out of that wheelchair at 6 months, you wouldn't have, and so there needed to be time for you to heal in the way that you needed to, and then to move forward, right? And so sometimes people want things right now, bring in my lover, make me have this new career, do these things, whatever the case may be, shift or heal this dynamic that I'm suffering from. But there's a process to it. There's like an onion that needs to be peeled. And sometimes you just crack it open and it's ready, if the person's ready, but it depends when they're coming to you, right? And where they're at.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, yeah, definitely.
Magical. So you do all of these different tools. You also, are, very much taking in a lot of the life experience and coaching and understanding of the human condition from all of your different studies and mentors, and also the religious studies and whatnot. And so you kind of bring this all in. And you give somebody a very much a transformational experience. And now you're taking that and applying that into this book. Now, I noticed that on the information that I had, we had your books that came to our store. But then I had noticed that the release date was 5/10/2019. Is it 5/10/2018?
No, that's actually the second book.
Oh, the second book coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you've been busy.
Yeah, working on the third book right now.
Oh, awesome. So then so definitely, oh, great. So we'll have you for a few book signings and book tours.
Yay! Please.
Where can people find you?
They can find me at realizeyourbliss.com.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And of course at Liberate Hollywood on the 28th for a free talk, and the 30th is going to be a workshop, and then you're doing a monthly series and residency with us starting in January.
Yes.
So for at least 4 months there, so we'll have you around there, and I know that you do some other things, some of the other places and centers and around town as well. If you had to leave anybody with something, what would you leave them with?
And if I could leave them with something?
With some bit of knowledge, wisdom, what would you leave them with?
Go with your feelings. Go with what you feel is good for you. That's just, it's that simple. It's that simple. Keep it simple, keep it light.
Keep it simple, keep it light. I love that. Thank you, Erika. It's been such a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person on the 28th. And till then.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. For those that are tuning in, please leave a feedback and review. If you could do a written comment, it just helps people find us a little bit more. Feel free to share this video with your friends, and contact Erika directly or come to Liberate Hollywood and meet her. Thank you so much.
Thank you.